Hello, and welcome back to Critical Weight Theory. And if you were never here before, where the heck were you? Anyway, in this episode, I'm taking a close look at the Trump family and their history, or lack thereof, when it comes to military service. I'm going to go back several generations, compare their choices to the draft system of the time, and bring in some context with another political figure. Well, I'll just spoil it right now. It's going to be Bill Clinton. So let's look first at Frederick Trump, the immigrant patriarch. That's right, he was an immigrant. The group of people that we're supposed to hate so much now. And sure, the argument always is that the Republicans only hate quote unquote illegal immigrants, but that's not quite true now, is it? They're trying to revoke citizenship of a lot of people. So that's being exposed as a sham as I speak. But anyway, moving past that talking point, let's start at the top. Donald Trump's grandfather, Frederick Trump, he immigrated to the United States in 1885 from the Kingdom of Bavaria. What's interesting here is that he left right before he would have been required to serve in the Bavarian military. German authorities later classified him as a draft dodger and stripped him of his German citizenship. So, the Trump family's American story actually begins with the decision to avoid military service. So, how about that? That's interesting. Sorry, I do have a little bit of a cold if you haven't noticed. And what about Fred Trump, the father of Donald Trump, and who always looks like some weird AI generated version of himself? Go ahead and look at all of the photos of Fred Trump that you can find. He really does look like some weird AI generated version of himself. It's crazy. Anyway, Fred Trump, he's you know Donald's father, of course. Fred was born in New York after the family returned from Germany. He never served in the military either, not in Germany and not in the United States. So again, no military record. What about Donald Trump, the son, the orange one, the orange turd that just wouldn't flush? Now, when we look at Donald Trump himself, he was born in 1946. He was of draft age during the Vietnam War. He received multiple student deferments while attending college and later a medical deferment for bone spurs in his feet. So he never served. That's why some people refer to him as bone spurs or some variation of that as, his title, his, I guess, honorary title. And yet he once compared his dating life to combat. In a 1993 interview with Howard Stern, Trump said, and I'm quoting him now, "If you have any guilt about not having gone to Vietnam, we have our own Vietnam. It's called the dating game. Dating is like being in Vietnam. You're the equivalent of a soldier going over to Vietnam." So, in classic Trump style, he was saying something strange and in a sort of strange, repetitive manner. There's that cold again. Sorry. Um, but he was comparing military service to avoiding either venereal diseases or unwanted pregnancies. So that statement, understandably, has drawn criticism. And let's not forget that Donald Trump also criticized John McCain, saying that he prefers soldiers who were not captured, who were not caught and turned into POWs. So you can find that video clip if you look for it. And in classic pathetic fashion, the Democratic Party never latched on to that, nor have they latched on to the creepy comments he said about his daughters. Even now, with all the Epstein stuff, they're still failing to do that. That could be a scandal unto itself, even putting the Epstein stuff aside. the things that he said about his daughters, but the Democratic Party has been a pretty abysmal failure when it comes to, you know, sophisticated, hardcore tactics of political attack. So, well, I guess that wouldn't be that sophisticated, but it's definitely more sophisticated than just doing nothing. Just saying, "Oh, Donald Trump is a meanie," and letting that be it, which is even to this day largely what they're doing when they're not rolling over and just accepting what is going on. That is. So, what about the next generation, Trump's children? What about his kids? Donald Trump Jr., born in 1977, didn't serve in the military. Instead, he went straight into the business world. Ivanka Trump, born in 1981, did not serve. As a woman, she wasn't subject to the draft. She pursued education at Wharton and later her career in business and fashion. And you can find some images of Trump kind of perving on his daughter. And when she appeared with him on the Wendy Williams show, Wendy Williams asked them what they have in common. And Ivanka said something about her business interests, that they share business interests. And Donald Trump said that they have sex in common. So, no red flags there. And the Democrats never latched on to that specific moment as a possible ad campaign during election season, or frankly any other time of year, which I think it could have been skillfully employed. And what about Eric Trump? Born in 1984, he didn't serve. Like his siblings, he moved directly into education and the family business. So, across three generations, Frederick, Fred, Donald, and Donald's children, we see a consistent pattern: no military service. So, what about the draft and Bill Clinton for another comparison? Because I already know that they're going to, the right wingers out there would bring him up as a similar example. And sure enough, there's something to that. But to put this into perspective, it's worth revisiting how the draft system worked during the Vietnam War. At the start of the war, student deferments were widely available. If you were an undergraduate in good standing, you could receive what was called I think as a 2S deferment. And if you went straight into graduate school, you could often extend that protection. That all changed in 1967. President Lyndon Johnson and Congress eliminated most graduate school deferments, except for fields considered vital to national interest, like medicine or science. After that, just staying in school wasn't enough to avoid the draft. So, Bill Clinton is a good example of how this played out in some ways. And, he still apparently either got lucky or maybe he did have some connections. I don't know exactly how this played out behind the scenes. But while at Georgetown University in the 1960s, he received student deferments. After graduation, he went to Oxford on a Rhodes Scholarship, which also delayed his draft eligibility. And eventually, his draft board reclassified him as eligible, and he briefly considered joining ROTC to avoid service, but he didn't follow through. In the end, his draft lottery number, 311 out of 366, was so high that he was apparently never called up. So Clinton benefited from the deferment system and then apparently lucked out with the lottery. He never served, but he never broke the law, just like possibly none of the, Trumps except for the, the oldest one that I mentioned ever broke the law in terms of this. But I don't know exactly the story behind the Bone Spurs claim. Admittedly, if you want me to cover that, I should have probably covered that in advance. I should have researched into it and included it as a part of this episode. But hindsight is 2020, and I'm already in the middle of reading this. So, what about all this? What does this mean? Well, it's a family trend. They all claim to be uber patriots, the most patriotic of the most patriotic. And when it comes down to it, so many people out there, so many Americans like to define patriotism as having served in the United States military. You know, it's the highest form according to some people, and then some of those same people will cling to this, this political dynasty wannabe, and they don't see the conflict, they don't see the contradiction of that. When somebody's acting like they're the most patriotic person on the planet, and they are so cheerleader-ish about the military, but they never actually served in the military. Well, it's a little bit jarring if you're actually being honest about it. And when we step back and look at the Trump family history, a pattern emerges. Frederick Trump left Germany rather than serve. Fred Trump stayed clear of military service in the US. Donald Trump used deferments during Vietnam, and none of his children have served in the armed forces. The facts are clear. So it's a through line. For over a century, the prominent male figures of the Trump family have found ways, legal, structural, or circumstantial, to avoid military service, and one of them even lost his legal citizenship over it. So that's it's borderline breaking the law. I'm not sure exactly how that works out legally, but if you lose your citizenship, it kind of complicates the message that you were following the rules, to a T. And I guess that's about it for today's episode. Well, as far as this topic goes, thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe or click like or whatever, you know, click a like button if there's one of those available. And I'm sure I'll be doing more dives into history and politics shaping America and looking at how we got to this rather sad and pathetic state that we're in today. All right, have a fantastic day.